Wow, let's see. It took me off of Zoom. Let me go back to Zoom. Okay. All right. Okay. Hey, Facebook family, how are y'all tonight? I'm sorry for the delay. We had a few technical difficulties, but we are glad that we were able to jump in and get everybody back on track. So I pray that everyone's day has been great. I pray that this has been one of those days that you've been able to make some changes, make some moves. I know for me, it's been a busy day, but I am glad to be amongst the living. I'm glad to be in the opportunity to sit at the table with these two great pastors, Pastor Dion Clark and Pastor Kervance Ross. It is a blessing to be sitting here with you all. I'm telling you, after last time in May, my phone blew up and said, y'all can't just abandon us. I mean, y'all got to have a part two. And I told myself, yeah, we're going to have a part two. I said, we're not going to abandon you. We're going to give y'all some information. So I said, let's go ahead and get it done while it's still fresh. But I tell you, so much has happened from May the 15th to June. I mean, we've had the world has changed. Our culture has changed. And so, I mean, it's really changed the mindset, even of the people, pastors. So it has just been a lot going on. And so, as I was thinking of the theme or topic for tonight, I think it's timely given everything that's went on. It's going to cause us to really reshape and really rethink how we do church. And so I think this has been one of those monumental moments that I think that we can really help people come into a greater understanding of where do we stand as church, but where do we stand exactly as it relates to the Black church. The Black church within itself has been monumental. I can tell you this, I had an opportunity the other day just to read a letter to Birmingham when Dr. King was in jail in Birmingham. And it was amazing how when he first came, the people really didn't want him to be there because they thought that he was going to raise a whole bunch of ruckus and he was just going to leave them. So he had to assure them why he was preparing to come in. Number one, he was invited to come in. And then number two, they had been planning, but the people felt so afraid because they didn't know the plan. And so he began to write in the letter that he was invited to come there. They were not going to be abandoned. But what I thought was very prolific is that he said at the very end of that letter, it's almost as if he gave them a declaration at the end of that letter, that he assured them that we're here for the long haul. This is just not going to be a temporary fix. And I've noticed in history, many times history changes when we actually put a plan in motion. And what a lot of people don't understand, they started planning the bus boycott year or so before they actually went into Alabama. It didn't just all of a sudden pop up on the scenes. So if you go back and look in history, there was some planning that went into that actual protest. And I tell you what, if we don't think that black dollars matter, they really matter. We made an impact on that state in that movement, which I think as we look at it now, as we're approaching Juneteenth tomorrow, we're approaching how we're going to look at our culture, the Black church. Our dollars matter, and I think that's something that we have to really consider as we allow ourselves to really reshape and rethink how this new era, what the church is coming to, and what are the things that we can empower people with when they walk away tonight. What is it that we can give them? So I'm gonna leave the floor for you all to give some introductions as to how things have changed from May all the way up to now to June, and what that looks like for Black America and especially the Black church. So I'm gonna leave some space for one of you all to jump on in and give your disclaimer or discourse to that.
I'll let the great pastor go first.
Oh man, you're too kind. I've learned that Pastor Clark is going to be efficient and making me feel better than I really am. So I'll take whatever lead he has. First of all, I'm honored again to have the opportunity to be with you, statesman and stateswoman of this process and of leading people in times where most times we realize we don't have any clear leadership.
Yes.
As of 4 days ago, it has been 90 days since we started in quarantine.
Wow.
We spoke on May 15th, and now we here embark on Juneteenth, as you stated.
Wow.
We just had, because of Black Voices Mattering, Donald Trump did not cancel his event, he just moved it.
Yes.
Simply because he realized that if we get on one accord, it can affect his future. You are now in a space where Starbucks went from stating that you can't wear Black Lives Matter t-shirts after they had the momentum of allowing their LGBTQ plus employees to stand their ground. And in a few days, they were giving out Black Lives Matter t-shirts. You have seen Louis Giglio, pastor of one of the largest churches in America, and he has a main location here in Atlanta, Passion City, on a panel for diversity, make a statement that it is not white privilege, it is a white blessing that slavery has happened, and has, with great PR direction, backtracked his statements. We've seen Rod Parsley, and I can go on and on and on. In this certain and uncertain circumstance, what we have to be clear of, since 34 days have passed, is that it's not about rhetoric. It is no longer about being on the right convention, being on the right revival platform. It is literally about having the right plan and message for the people that you serve, so that it is not just regional, but it's global. And we're at a point in our country where people want to know, where do you stand? I think the challenge is it starts with a heart check, because many of us that have led people have been leading them following a blueprint of a leader that does not have a voice in this generation.
Yes.
And because of that, COVID-19 has forced many of us to try to figure out who we are while we're trying to direct people to be led to an area that they've never been in before. And I think our biggest challenge has to be our track record over the last 90 days. What are we doing? What have we caused people to understand and see change through in 90 days? Have we shouted people? Have we forced them to want to go back into a sanctuary? Or have we made them realize that the church mattered so much that if it wasn't here, the community would be without a voice? And now we got to make a decision. Where are we going to stand? Do we stand with what we've been told? Do we stand with what we've been taught? Or do we sucker up and figure out who we are on the inside, what our purpose is described us to be, and who we've been designed to impact? And if we don't make the decision in our particular churches, what we'll find is, when this thing is all over, when COVID has found a prescription, when Black lives start to matter everywhere else but our community, we will quickly find that the people who we pastor have found other pastors, found other leaders, and found greater direction. So it's got to start with us, for us to figure out who we are in these times where they're unprecedented and we can't use cliff notes to figure out what the other person is reading, writing, and saying on their test.
Yeah. See why I let him go first, because there's really nothing else left to say.
Oh man,
what a great orator he is. But Dr. Erica, I think everything that Pastor just said is definitely spot on. But also, what I've also learned is, I believe that God allowed. I believe personally, my belief is that everything is either God allowed or God ordained. And meaning, I believe that God allowed this pandemic to happen to be able to shift the systematic racial issues that are going on because if the world was still moving, we wouldn't be still enough for everybody to pay attention to it. That's first. So secondly, if corporate America is paying attention to it, then why isn't the African American church paying attention to it? Everyone that Pastor just named from, this is bringing exposure to corporations, to CEOs, to everyday neighbors, to people just that we connect with, we look up to, that we spend our money with. This is exposing a lot of people. But the question is, what are we doing with the exposure? What are we doing? What's next? What is we as a church? Are we speaking up? Are we standing still, or are we moving upon where we are? And so, as he said, it's been 90 days, and it's been a long 90 days just dealing with COVID itself. And then on top of this, that's just added things. And so I agree that the three things that I am asking my church to do as of this week is to remain committed to the cause, remain consistent to the cause, and remain connected to the cause. Mm-hmm. And so I'm asking them to do those 3 C's that are just simple things to make sure that everything, so that way we can make sure we walk through every way. And as you know, I am in an overabundance of trying to make sure I'm connected to my city, the city officials. And I think each church should try to have city officials. So my desire, my vision is to make sure I have somebody on Guilford County Commissioners, to make sure I have somebody on City Council, make sure I have somebody in my church on school board. That is my vision and my desire, because that's how change happens. And that's how the church needs to change. We can't just come in these 4 walls and shout hallelujah and speak in tongues and walk across the pews and have good worship and cry and lay on the altar and lay hands. All that is well and good. But when you get up, are you converting everything you just submitted?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's good. That's good. And whenever when Starbucks came out with that statement, I said to myself, they are committing social suicide as it relates to their business. As many people that go to Starbucks and you are electing not to at least speak to the issue of Black Lives Matter, in my opinion, you really they were cutting their throats off. And I think it was very quickly, within 24 hours, kind of come back with something, because they knew, and within 24 hours span, they had to do it. They had a good cleanup person on the back to do PR for them, because they had released a statement that I don't think they really thought it through. I thought if they made this statement, it was not going to affect. What I can tell you is we own a Black coffee shop here in Greensboro. And when I tell you, as a result of Starbucks, all of a sudden we've gotten people coming, didn't even know we've been in our location for 5 years. And so as a result of us, it really helped us. A lot of people direct their funds to somewhere else. And it has been instrumental for us that were able to get customers to support Black businesses, which leads me into the point of how important is it for us as a culture and a church to support the Black businesses in our community. And I know someone said to me, but a lot of our prices are higher than if we go down the street. So how important is it for us to really encourage our congregants, our community, to support Black businesses? And how is that important in reshaping and reframing the face of the Black church and the face of the Black community? I want to pose that question.
Well, one of the things that is important about this conversation, if anybody has heard me for any amount of time, one of the things that I try to get people to understand is that we've got to see the Bible differently, number one. Because from the African American context, we've seen the Bible only from a spiritual lens. We've never looked at it from its kingdom perspective. We have no idea that 67% of the people that we're preaching about and reading about in the Bible are not preachers. They are marketplace masters. Mm-hmm. And when you start to look at them through those lenses, I have to keep repeating that, because some kind of way we have cognitive dissonance with the truth about what the Bible actually says, as opposed to what we've been taught. Mm-hmm. What that forces many of us to do is it puts us, particularly in our church leadership, in places where most times churches see entrepreneurs in their congregations as crutches for tithes and offering. I'll say that again. The reason that that is so problematic is that they won't invest in them, but they will pimp them to invest into the church. One of the things that is impactful about the term investment is that I'm taking a risk, hoping that I get a reward. So if I take a higher risk, I expect a higher reward. If I take a medium risk, I expect a medium reward. If I take a low risk, I expect a low reward. If I take no risk, I expect no reward. The challenge is business owners in the Black church often are taking risk on the church. The church is never taking risk on them. So what is happening is the church is the only space in our community that embodies every type of economic, socioeconomic, and classification in one building. You got poor people, you got rich people, you got singles, you have married, you have straight, you have LGBTQ+, you have corporate execs, and you have entrepreneurs. And the problem is when we get ready to do business, what we'll end up doing is going outside of our sanctuary, doing business and touting the folks outside and overlooking and asking the people inside that do the expertise to give us free consultation on people we pay. This causes a conflict in how people in our ministry value the ministry. On top of that, we do no business in the community. It was indicative and imperative for me this weekend with all this going on in the lives of Black men, everything that you hear negative about Black fathers, to make sure that as we gave back to the community at New Birth, I made sure we went to 5 Black barbershops. And not only did we ask them to give 100 cuts, we then turned around and told them we will compensate them for investing in the community.
Wow.
Now, most of these barbershops didn't go to New Birth. They had heard about us, but we turned around and gifted our men and then turned the Black dollar around in the process of giving to the community.
Wow.
This is indicative of this process. I think it's also a mind shift for our people, because we have been taught that if you're doing business with Black business owners, the first thing you got to do is say, the reason I don't do Black business is because they don't treat me right. Well, tell me who treats you right. Because you go in Gucci, they follow you around the store. You go in the beauty salon to purchase your hair. They won't even greet you until you put your debit card in and type your 4-digit PIN. And if it's less than $5, they're gonna make you buy something you didn't want. Exactly. All of these places you will patronize and allow them to denigrate you, but yet you turn around and find somebody like you, and your reason is the first time a customer service issue goes awry, we can't do business with them. You're gonna tell me that their hot dogs are higher. Yeah, their hot dogs may be higher simply because you won't buy hot dogs from them at all.
That's right.
Black businesses don't do anything different than any other business. The only thing that happens different with Black businesses is that Black people don't traditionally support them. So what we have to actually do is minister to our people on the value of Black entrepreneur. We've then got to turn around and do what we are requesting our people to do and invest in the Black entrepreneur. And then thirdly, we've got to listen to the advice once we invest. It is impossible for you to invest in somebody and then tell them how to do what they do. You've got to follow the directions, and then they turn around and give their tithes, their offering, and their other expressions of giving. It is important for us as pastors to make sure that we don't try to pastor somebody else's business in an area that we don't have expertise. So it forces all of us to get inside of a system and realize that if we're going to turn this dollar around, it starts with us putting in first, and then they put out into what we put into. But it's a mind shift for all of us to now start seeing each of us as valuable.
That's good. That's good.
I don't have anything to say after that. No, seriously. Seriously, I mean, because that's exactly what we have to do, because that's what other ethnicities, other religions, that's what they're trained to do. They're trained to keep the dollars circulating within themselves, and so then it builds wealth within. So I agree with Pastor.
And I think one of the things that may I think causes some reservation, especially for us promoting or investing in the other Black businesses. I think one of the things is that customer service is still everything. And I think for a lot of people, when we go, I have sat and just watched us go into stores, Black customers going to other Black establishments, the interaction, the dialogue, all that is different than if they would go into somebody else's store. I remember for years, some years ago, we went to California and we went into the Louis Vuitton store. Louis Vuitton on Sunset Boulevard, they close at 5 p.m. At 5 p.m., the gates come down. That covers the glass so nobody can break in. And they may have one or two pieces that you can see on the outside. So when we went in the store, I said, this is Hollywood. Why would they close Louis Vuitton up early? Well, if you've never been to California, been on Sunset Boulevard, right up from where they have the Oscars, beyond that, that's the homeless population. So they have to get that street cleaned up completely for the Oscars. They transformed their whole street just so they can have one night of glitz and glam. And so they pour into it so that homeless people can live on the street all day long. But when it gets time for them to have an award ceremony or whatever it is, they clean the street up. And you never know by looking at the outside that street. So you go from one end of Sunset Boulevard, it looks like, I mean, you can see the Hollywood sign. You go on the other end, you're thinking, is this the same street? And so I think what happened, change. Just because my business may not be located in a Black community does not mean that my business is not valuable. And sometimes we locate ourselves with a lot of Black people. Well, you moved to the other side of town. Well, maybe I moved to the other side of town because I know they will support me. Well, you're too far. I hear that you're too far. Your hours are not convenient. So we find all the reasons why we can't support and we don't pour into. So then we have to go over and beyond to do customer service. I mean, we've got to do extra to give customer service just for them to come into our places of business. But what we learned for ourselves, 102 Jams, one of the radio announcers on there, he gave a shout out the end of last week. We didn't even know, and he took a picture. We had no idea. All of a sudden, our Facebook and Instagram page just blew up. I'm thinking, what has happened? Like, we didn't do no event. I didn't do no promotional. He made one comment. There's a Black coffee shop in Greensboro. They're located at here. And our Instagram, Facebook has just blown up, all because he had influence on the radio. He gave a shout out. He posted a picture on his Instagram page. And it's like overnight, everybody's asking, are y'all all new? No, we've been in the location almost 5 years. And so all because he took a chance on somebody that he didn't know. He came in and got coffee. He said, I'm going to expose you all to the greater Greensboro area. He did it. Now all of a sudden we getting customers that have never been there before. I said that to say this: whenever we feel like we're stuck, God always sends somebody to pull us out. And we have to look for what that looks like. Who does that look like? They're not going to always look like me. They may not always look like you. They may not be cleaned up. They may not be the most presentable, but you never discount something because it doesn't look like you. And because we may not actually have the education, they may not even talk with clear speech. But it does not mean that they don't have value, as you said. So I think we have to look at our community itself as value. We cannot undermine the value of our own community. So you have to understand. And the thing about it is, when we came into the building that we're in now, we came there with a white guy and a Black guy. They were in business together, and they ended up going out of business. And so those that were in the building asked us, do we want to stay? We said, sure, we'll stay. And at first we had no idea what we're going to do, how we're going to do that space. But God has allowed us to turn the space around, businesses to come in because we're located inside of a building. So you can't see us. So without the street visible, you'll never know that we are there. So when he gave the shout out this week, it shed light on who we are. And now people say, well, can we order online? We've had an app. We've had an app for a year. We never put it out because we figured nobody's going to really use it. So now today I got calls, what's your app? Can we order online? So now I told them, I said, y'all, we need to have a release app party. Let them know we got an app they can order online and they can come and pick it up. And so I'm saying that we have to make marketplace ministry, our churches, quick and accessible. Nobody wants to go through a whole bunch of steps to get to where you are. If they can't find you quickly, then they'll go on to the next person. And so we have to look at our community as value. And what we saw with the death of George Floyd is that it wasn't so much the people were angry with their community, they were angry with the people that were policing their community. And they had no other form of outlet. And so what we saw was the result of pent up frustration and anger that was there before he died. It was there with Castro, what's the name for Fernando Castro? When he died, there were frustrations from that. There were no, they were not convicted as a result of that. And so now we're looking as if this was, I think if the pandemic had not happened, we would have looked at his death as just another Black man that died. But I believe God made the world. When I tell you, when it amazed me when you have people in New Zealand and London and Australia, they are doing protests because of a knee in the neck of a Black man. It amazed me that the world took the time to see it. I don't think if we didn't have a pandemic, I think it would have been overlooked, as Pastor Clark had said earlier. I think this was God ordained for us to reevaluate, restructure really how we do marketplace ministry and how we do church. I really think.
Yeah, and let me say this too. I think me and Pastor touched on this in our first Zoom thing, but one thing you just said about marketplace ministry and 102 Jams giving you the shout out and the app and all those things. One thing I think we in the marketplace and the ministry marketplace we're talking about is we got to make sure we're prepared for what's next right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's what we talked about last time, Pastor. Me and you was talking about how we as churches as a whole, not ones that we're social, but we as churches as a whole, we're behind. And so we didn't try to catch up with the pandemic waves until the pandemic happened. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's too late. You got to already be thinking ahead what's next. And that's also part of ministry marketplace, is thinking about what's next right now. I guarantee you, like even for me, myself, my church, I guarantee you for Pastor, I guarantee you for his own vision, I guarantee you for Dr. Brown, I guarantee you for those who cover me, like you have to be 3 years ahead in vision, at least 3 years, at least. Like you have to be cast a vision 3 years away. You have to know right now. That's how you prepare what's next. So we have to be sure that as we do ministry marketplace, that we're focusing on what's next and building for what's next right now, because I believe that we always will make excuses for why we can't build what's next right now. What we don't have, who's not on our side, who's not with us. You know, and so we live in fear and we operate in fear. But we gotta stop operating in fear and start operating in faith. You know, so if you have faith in your vision, you have to go for it. Yes, sir, Pastor. Go ahead.
You triggered something for me, and it is the whole dynamic of one of my favorite stories in the Bible, Nehemiah. Mm-hmm. And what is interesting about Nehemiah is he is the picture and the prototype for crisis capitalization. Because what Nehemiah has become comfortable with is his government job. He has now realized that he has a voice based off of the generation that he came up in to be an executive in a government space that gives him credibility and comfort. But it forced him to forget about his purpose, because all he wanted to do was be important. And now he becomes the wall between the king and the kitchen. You can't poison the king as long as Nehemiah protects him from being able to have poison in his Hennessy, poison in his creme brulee, poison in his ribeye. Yeah. But in the middle of his takeoff moment, there is a pandemic outbreak, and the people from his hometown come to him. And while he's hanging out in the mall at Lenox, they say, hey man, you know, everything back home is in shambles. The people that are from our hometown, you remember Junebug, you remember Bebe, all of them can't be protected. And it burdens Nehemiah. But it highlights for Nehemiah that he's been doing this good for the government when he could be doing it great for himself. And at the same time, he can be impacting people that he now has a platform to help identify a purpose. But get this, when he goes to build the wall, the people who told him that that was a problem never helped him build the wall. They never show up. They never come and say, hey, let me give you a donation to go to Lowe's. Let me help you put up some sheetrock. They identified the issue and then they disappeared. And that's the main challenge that we as entrepreneurs have to understand, that when a crisis comes, people will tell you what's wrong, but most of them won't help you. And you've got to be so comfortable navigating the unknowns by yourself so that you can create a template for the people who are coming along. I remember when I started my business, I would always ask people who were entrepreneurs, what did you do to get here? And out of sheer generational fear, they would always say, work hard, young man. I'm like, what is that going to help me do where I am? We've got to recondition ourselves so much because we've got to admit that we hate ourselves in a lot of contexts. We hate anything that's Black. We hate anything that's Black owned. We hate anything that we control. Most of us who've learned how to be successful in business have learned to put a different face on the business and operate as an employee, because the first time they find out it's yours, you got a problem. And this is the reconfiguring we have to talk about in church more than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John from a spiritual context. You've got to realize that, unfortunately, the African-American group is the only ethnic group on the planet that has never had an organized crime syndicate. Every other group has been able to organize crime and move forward. And simply because we don't like to see one person rise higher than another person, we have a challenge doing crime right. So if we have a challenge with crime, we will always have a challenge with community. And it forces us to now stand on the wall and say, hey, while I'm up here, come up here, let me show you how I did it. This is what's going to happen when you get here. You've got to build, as Pastor Dion was saying, you got to build contingencies even before you get there. You can't shoot for Coca-Cola and not be prepared for everything that will go wrong when they tell you they're going to pay you net 190 or net 90, and you thinking you're going to get paid tomorrow, and you don't have the capacity to maintain the process. We've got to educate people more than just on the Gospels. We got to educate them on life in church.
Yeah, I think it's right. And let me ask you a question. So if you're looking at a church and you're saying, hey, what is it going to look like for me to reshape my church or refocus my church? What is some advice you would give to a pastor that is listening to us tonight and saying, I don't know where to start? What should I start with? Should I start with myself? Should I start with the leaders? Where's a starting point that I can begin? Because I can almost, I would, if I was a betting person, there are some pastors that have not taken advantage of this downtime. There are some pastors that this could have been a time for them to refocus, reshape, restructure. And now that we have now been in 90 days, some of them are just thinking about restructure now. Some of them are they're starting to think about refocusing. Some of them are just looking at their leadership. And now we're in summer. It looks like we may still be in a stay-at-home state, especially here in North Carolina, the way things are going. What is that going to look like? Are we preparing people to go back to the same place, or are we preparing people for a different outlook? So what would you tell a pastor now to say, hey, I'm just now starting. I'm behind the 8 ball. I should have been planning earlier, but now I realize that, but now I got to jump on. What advice would you give someone as a starting point?
Pastor Clark, I don't want you to beat me up, so I'm letting you go first.
Actually, so that's a loaded question, and it, first of all, my recommendation first would be to go back to your vision. The pastors have to first go back to that vision, and they have to determine most pastors, not most, Lord forgive me for saying that. A lot of pastors, because they'll eat me up. I get inboxes and everything, Pastor. But most pastors run their church not even operating in the vision that they created. And so they say this is the vision, but everything they do operates outside of that vision. So my first recommendation would be to go back to your vision and ask, is everything I'm doing vision focused, or falling in line with the vision and the mission of the church? And then if it's not, it's okay to change it. So that way, if God is telling you to change it, do that. Secondly, without wearing your leaders out, your staff out, your people, find what it is that you think your church needs right now. I can't operate. I can take strategies and ideas and make them mine, but I can't run my church how New Birth runs their church, because I don't have the budget, the capacity, the staff to do so. So you have to start operating in your means. And so Bishop Brister out of New Orleans gave me some valuable advice. And he said, Clark, whatever you do, don't compete, don't compare, and don't complain. And so many times, just as members are church shopping, pastors are looking at other pastors, and they're getting thoughts like, God, why you ain't give me a church like that? Why I can't have lights like that? Why I don't have this like that? And the question should not be why, but it should be, God, what do I need to do to get to what I need? And after the what, how do I get there? And then we can go back and ask why, or what we're not doing based on what we think God has told us to do. And so those are areas that I would start in, that even me, and I've taken the time to make sure that I am making sure that when we come back, that it's not the same church. I don't say the same church, meaning the same consistency, same order, but something in every single church is going to have to shift, because none of us really know what church is going to look like. That's just truth. We don't know. We can only anticipate. We don't know if it's going to be packed. We don't know if people are going to come running. We don't know if we're going to have to start off having 10 services a weekend. We don't know. And we don't know what this thing looks like. And so we just have to be prepared. And so those are a few things for me and advice that I would give. And I'm sure he has much better advice than
that. Pastor is not my friend. He
I love him.
Well, a good friend of mine said that once his father died, he would talk to his mother, and she, for years, was in a potential space that she was almost anticipating that one day she'd wake up and her husband would still be there. And after about 5 or 6 years, and her son going into ministry and starting to take off, he preached a sermon, and she came to him after the service and said, "It just hit me. It will never be the same again, but I'm going to move forward with what I have." I think the first thing most churches have to do is come to the grips that it will never be the same again. And I've got to move forward with exactly what I have. So the first thing you got to do is evaluate what you have. And this is a critical time for pastors, because they've never had to do this much evaluation, because there were so many cover-ups that church allowed us to do that minimized the issues that we had going on. Every Black church knows how to do Sunday morning. When the lights come on and the air conditioning has been on since 6 o'clock the night before, you know that once those people come in, I can lean on the fact that I can get them to the emotional place that will get them through to these tithes and offering and possibly the next Sunday. But when you can't look at Negroes no more, when nobody is saying amen, when you've got to preach to the current circumstance of the age, and you got people who literally health-wise it is not even best for them to show up. The first thing you got to do is look at yourself and ask, what's my purpose in this ministry? You talked about early on, this is the moment where God used crisis to clean us, where he forced us to take inventory of ourselves and say, now, what is it that you do that nobody can do but you? And if you don't get it done, it won't get done. It is not about how sweet your clothes is. Your clothes could be so sweet that you got diabetes, but it has nothing to do with this moment in time. It has to focus on, what am I purpose to do in this place that I've been called to? And the honest reality is, you've got to get to the point that if you realize that your purpose no longer fits this place, this is not a prison sentence. That you've got to realize that this may be God's way of getting me out of this and blaming it on COVID. Because this is one of the moments where you can blame everything on COVID-19. So the first thing is identifying purpose. The second thing is looking at potential. Because now that I know what my purpose is, let me see where my potential is. I now have opportunities that give me the platform to do things I could not have done on Sunday morning with us having all that we had going on. There are preachers now who realize why folks don't come to church on Sunday, because Sunday is the greatest day to rest out of every day of the week. So now they realize that I can change my schedule. I can alter my preparation. I can go out in the community. I can spend time with family. I can tap into people who I condemned in the past and cultivate people who are overlooked and prepare for the potential of tomorrow. So you got your purpose. You then have your potential. You now have to focus on your platforms, because what you start to realize is there are multiple ministries that you had in your church that never met any needs. You got 35 ministries, and 35 of those ministries do absolutely nothing. You have a medical ministry and nobody passes out any prescriptions. It's not a medical ministry. You may have a health and wellness piece. You now have the opportunity that your church only saw 30 people on a hot Sunday, and now you got 200 folks tune in that you've never seen. Your platform has changed. So now you have to evaluate that. And then you have to ponder your unnecessary weight. So the fourth thing is pondering. You now got to look back and say, how many people am I carrying that have been burdening me down? This is the Hebrews 12:1 platform. You got to lay aside every weight.
Yeah.
Weight is that thing that holds you down. It is, it's like hip boots on a 100-meter dash runner. It's not, hip boots not bad by themselves, but they don't help you trying to run the 100-yard dash. So you now got to ponder the people who have now caused you to be set back. And number 5, you got to think about your profitability. What is most profitable for me in this time? Do I try to get people back into a sanctuary that I might kill off half of them trying to get one good Sunday in? Or do I invest in lights? Do I invest in the proper Wi-Fi and the proper speed? Do I now use my church as an opportunity to generate revenue by renting it out to a MLM, multi-level marketing platform? Do I do other things with the property I've been given? Do I now go into areas that I've been called to, and do I write that book? Do I put that business plan together? What is profitable outside of Sunday morning? Because if everything you banked on to make your ministry work was about tithes and offering, you're already failing, and God has given you a mulligan to be able to start over, and you can go back and blame it on COVID. This is that moment to go back and look at those P's and readjust your platforms.
And oh, that's good. See, that's good. But you just, like you said to me, you just stirred up something in me, because I told a pastor today, Pastor, I told them that a lot of people, everything you just said is so on point, because a lot of pastors want what every other pastor has, but not what God has for them. We want what we see every other pastor has, but guess what? We don't know the journey it took for them to get what they have. We don't We don't know the oil it takes to carry the mantle they're walking in. We don't know.
Pastor Clark, you come around the mountain, here you come. This is this the big challenge here. I tell people all the time, everybody wants a Bentley, nobody wants the car note. Mm-hmm. And the reality here is this will sober you up to realize that it is a different moment coveting somebody else's blessing that will burden you. This is the moment where we literally have to be grateful for what God didn't allow us to jump into. Yes. Because there are some pastors who were getting ready to go and undergird a ministry that if they had taken it, they would have killed themselves in the last 90 days because they didn't have the anointing to manage it. This is the opportunity for a lot of pastors to find a mentor that will be honest with their circumstance. Yes. And it cannot be minimized. Pastors do not need mentors that are other pastors.
That's right.
They need mentors who are outside of their auspices. You don't need a hooping mentor. You don't need a mentor that's going to tell you that they hate their church and you hate your church too. That's a misery. That's not a mentor. You need somebody who's already won. And if you get a pastoral mentor, get a pastor who is already accomplished where you're headed. So you need mentors in the marketplace space. You need mentors in the relationship space. You don't need just one mentor, you need multiple. And that's the challenge. Most pastors, all their friends are preachers and they don't like them. So this is the moment where pastors have to be able to step back and say, I don't know anything about infrastructure. I'm going to say this and I'm going to put it out here. It is a challenge for you to be a pastor and see a guy who didn't fit your template before COVID and now realize that that platform or that individual fits your template post-COVID and allow your ego to never connect with that person. This is an ego check moment. If anything ought to get sick, it's your ego.
Wow.
Right now, you literally got to take the mask off your ego and pray that it gets sick while covering yourself and hoping that you get well in this process. And it is a challenge to pastors to put themselves in a position where God is forcing you to speak now and no longer strike. This is the big challenge with where Moses is on his journey to promise. God is giving Moses one more chance because people forget that Moses was in a situation where he had a challenge operating in his purpose because he complained about what he didn't have. Yes. So when he complained he didn't have a voice, he gave him Aaron. Yeah. He said, well, I can't walk into this place because everybody got a staff but me. He gave him a staff. He said, throw the staff down and watch it turn into a snake. He said, all of them got staffs, they're snakes. He said, the difference between your staff and their staff is when you pick yours up, your staff will be able to assimilate to the transition. So he said, I'm going to give you a staff. I gave you a voice. He now gives him a rod. He says that every time you've got an issue, stretch out your rod and the rod will do resolving. He now starts to use his staff to strike stuff he was supposed to speak to. And he minimizes his rod, not to redemption, but he relegates it to striking and destroying what God is building up. So for this final time, he says, Moses, I got to show the people that I can turn anything around. You don't know how to speak and you don't realize the power I've given you. This time, don't strike the rock, speak to it. Because before I can take you into the promised land, I've got to show them that you speak well of me the way you're asking them to speak well of you. And Moses makes the mistake of not speaking. And God says, I got to kill you. I got to kill your mouthpiece. And I'm going to bury you in a place that nobody knows but me. Why? Because you never said a word. So they can't even give a eulogy about a person they ain't never heard speak. The only person that can speak about you is me. So I know it's COVID. We got social distancing. We can only have 10 people in the place at one time. I'm going to be all 10 because I'm perfect for you. I'm going to speak at your funeral and bury you. Because all I need people to do moving forward is be bold enough to open their mouths. And right now, pastors have to change their strategy and be bold enough to say what they were afraid to say before COVID, and then stuff will start shifting.
And I'm sorry, can I
Go
add to that?
Go ahead.
And because Pastor, this is one thing that irritates me about the kingdom as a whole. that everything that we just said will keep us stuck, and then it keeps the people that we serve stuck. And so it keeps us, so we're operating as leaders in bondage, and it's keeping our people in bondage.
Yes.
And God did not call us to lead people to keep them in bondage.
No.
He called us to help them get their freedom.
Yes.
He called us to help them see their best. I tell people all the time, from my minstrels to my praise and worship leaders to my leaders, to anybody, listen, I don't just want you to be good when you come in these four walls, but I want you to be great outside of these four walls. Because you being great outside these four walls will also make you great inside these four walls. Watch this. So I want you to go fix your credit. I want you to go after the better job. I want you to become the principal of the school. I don't want you to be a teacher assistant. I want you to have your own classroom. You deserve to lead. So we have to learn how to make people better. And you already know, you are talking like, in Numbers where it said we look like grasshoppers.
Yes.
Right. So many pastors are operating and needing alterations on what they're wearing, on what they're saying, on how they're operating. And so they're wearing a ministry that don't even fit them.
Wow.
They're leading leaders with structure that don't even fit their vision. They don't even fit the kingdom at this point. They don't even fit where we are, where we're going. And so they're afraid to get alterations because of their ego. They're afraid to make a change because of their ego. They're afraid to do what's next. Watch this. They're afraid to surround themselves with other people who know more than them about certain areas because of their ego. But I'm the type of leader that if somebody knows more than me, I need them at my table because I need them helping me become a better me and helping the kingdom as a whole. And so when pastors and leaders learn how to get past that moment, the kingdom will be much stronger. But because when an alteration is needed, watch this, everybody can't make alterations. There are people who are designed, trained to make alterations. You can't go get pants and unless you absolutely want them designed that way. You can't go get pants altered and have one leg shorter than the other. If you do, someone didn't make proper alterations. That's what's going on in the kingdom in these pastors and these churches. We're making improper alterations and we're leaving our people short. We're leaving our leaders short, and we're leaving the kingdom as a whole short because we're making improper alterations because of our egos, and we're afraid to let it go because of what we think it's supposed to look like. Because we think we're supposed to have 20 armor bearers and 10 members. Because we think we're supposed to drive a Mercedes. Because we think we're supposed to have all that.
Yes.
No, you got to make the alterations that fit you. It took me a while to understand I don't need to be like everybody else. Because if I'm like everybody else, I look the same as everybody else. But what about you, Pastor? What about you, leaders? What about you, those of you who serve? What about you, those of you who listen, that want to be different? I dare you tonight just to be different. I dare you to be different. I challenge you to do something that nobody else is doing. I challenge you to do something in your ministry that you've never done before. I don't care what size it is. I don't care who you got to call. I don't care what egos you have to drop. I challenge you, man. I'm sorry I'm getting so passionate.
No.
Resonate with me because you got to understand this is how we have been operating, and we've been operating to make for lack of alterations that needed. Like you said, Pastor, it may be time for some, even if it was me, if it come back and it ain't for God's will for me to still pastor, guess what? I got to be prepared in my mind for that. If it don't work, and I got to be ready for that. Listen, truth be told, mentally, is it taxing to wonder if? Absolutely. But is that assault? And do I have to prepare? Absolutely. but you also have to understand that it's okay to drop your ego. And if you got to murder somebody, if you got to go submit, because pastors, we don't like to submit. You were talking about mentors, you were talking about coverings and all that. The problem is we don't want to submit because we think we know it all. So we just got to get to a point where we start making proper alterations so we're not walking lopsided. So we're not doing ministry off. And I'm sorry, I'm done. I took too long.
No. Dr. Hendrick, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I started to realize why you keep putting me and Dr. Clark together. We come from the same family, clearly. And I think we just hit on a reality that this moment, and hear me when I say this, is important for our leaders to now be able to say this stuff doesn't fit me. I think that is the most important moment in David's life. When he's in the midst of Saul, he's been serving Saul, and Saul is afraid to fight a giant that is assigned to him. And David takes on that responsibility. And the first thing Saul says to David is, well, since you're going to go out here, you might as well put on my stuff. And David is honest enough when he looks in the mirror and says, if I go out here dressed like you, I'm going to fail. He said, this stuff don't fit. Take this off of me and let me put on my shepherd clothes, because that's what fits me. And I think it's important in this season that whether you are a seasoned pastor or you've been pastoring for a month, this is the season where everybody gets on the same level. The small pastor can now have a conversation with the large pastor, and we can realize we learned something. You may have never heard of Pastor Kervance Ross and Pastor Clark, but you've heard of us now.
Yes.
You are in a space where you cannot allow this moment to minimize your future. And it is so imperative for you to be authentic. I've said it before and I won't stop saying it. Nobody thought that Donald Trump was smarter than Hillary Clinton, but a mass majority of people thought he was more believable and authentic. And they voted for authenticity over intellect. This is the moment where we literally got to realize that this generation wants people that are real. We all grew up in the time frame where it was good to be holy from 10 to 1 on Sunday. But for the rest of the week, you could live outside of your Halloween mask. This is now the season where people want to be able to see, I will follow you if you show me what it really looks like to be a follower of Christ. I'm a part of a spiritual movement called Holy Smokes. And I'm not afraid to say that one of my balances in life is I'm a cigar aficionado. I enjoy cigars. They allow me to stay balanced. For those of you who think it's a sin, keep praying for me. God ain't through with me yet. But I just refuse to let church keep me from being balanced. But what we found out is we have the dean of the School of Theology at McAfee on our committee. We have all of the School of Countless Theology School, their students are on there. And what happened is when we showed up in a space that had a parallel to non-believers and even Christians, every week we showed up to do our Bible study, somebody got saved at a cigar bar. Get this. People got saved not because of the facility, but because of the authenticity. And it's a challenge that we are missing people by not using practical platforms to make pragmatic change. And we just got to do that and watch how this situation shifts for all of us on every level.
I tell y'all what, y'all done said so much, I can just run out my house, the front door, and just scream one good time. As y'all just giving us so much. But let me tell you something. I preached a message on Sunday. I ain't ashamed to tell you, I was scared to preach the sermon. When God gave me the sermon topic, Hidden Figures, I did not know that God was going to shift me into you really looking at, has God begun to expose leaders for who they really are? And what has happened is there's been exposure. You've been in a church for 25 years and God's beginning to expose you. But what I like about God, even in his exposing, he does not leave you out there by yourself. It would behoove us for if God was to expose me, for somebody to walk past me who know me and leave me laying there. What happens is, as leaders, we leave people wounded and we show up on the scene, as Pastor Clark said, with 20 armor bearers, and we got 10 members, and the one that was wounded, we walk over them because they don't really matter to us. We don't have time in the season to walk over the wounded. We cannot walk over the wounded anymore and look as if they do not exist. Because what we have to realize when we come back into our place of worship, we now have to embrace the theology of pastoral care and counseling. You may not be a counselor. You may not have looked at any counselor. It will behoove you as a pastor to start looking at some counseling material, because you're going to have people in your church that have lost people to COVID. They've lost jobs. They may have lost homes. They themselves may have been struggling with COVID. So now you have to become a counselor from the pulpit. And now you have to become to a state of, what does that look like for me? And so as I was thinking, there was 4 things that Dr. King, when he was organizing the nonviolent march in Birmingham, Alabama, there were 4 things he looked at. I'm telling you, it blew my mind when I read them. He said there, and he made it clear to the group, if you're going to commit yourself to cause, you have to be committed to these 4 things. And if cannot commit yourself to these 4 things, he said you're not the right person for the team. He said that we have to determine whether injustice really exists. In other words, you have to gather data. Are you, pastor, gathering data while you're doing the COVID? Are you really looking at numbers? Are you gathering data of those who experience loss, be it financially, spiritually? What is that? Is somebody in your church collecting data? That's number 1. Number 2, are you negotiating? Are you negotiating? It may be that you're in a space that no longer will accommodate your needs as a church, because now your church you've either shrunk or your churches are going to grow. So are you at a table that you can negotiate? We should never have buying power without negotiation. We got to negotiate. The other thing he said, self-purification. And I looked up that word and I looked at what he meant by that. Are you able to examine yourself? Are you able to just look at yourself and say, hey, I thought I could do this, but I'm really not the right person to lead this ministry. I thought I could be on the evangelism team. I can't lead the evangelism team, because once I've been in COVID and I've been looking at myself, I can be better being an usher or a greeter. And the other thing is, are you committed to taking direct action? As Pastor Clark said, we don't have time to really play with this thing. Are you ready to take direct action? Are you ready to look at what is not working and be transparent and say, this is not working for my space? I've got to do something else different. Because if I continue down the road that I'm in, I'm really setting myself and my church up for failure. And then when I look up 3 months from now, I don't even have a church, because I didn't look at collecting data. I did not look at negotiations. I did not look at self-retrospection. And I did not take direct action when I could have taken direct action while in COVID. So these are some things. And so I looked at that. I said, how can that be a model for us today? What does that look like for the church when we sit back and we see things that we should have taken action upon? Now you have the time to do it. But have you let ego to set in? Has fear set in that if I address this issue now, am I going to lose a group of people? Because I now have to restructure my leadership. I now have to restructure and redirect where I send my funds to. I now have to look at my ministry from an evangelistic standpoint, or do I look at my ministry from a building standpoint? So I've got to be open to change. I've got to be open to new things. And we have to look at our church and say, am I the person for that? Am I the one to lead the people where they need to go? I may have gotten you this far, but somebody else needs to carry you the rest of the way. I even posed a question to them on Sunday. Some of you are with churches. Now God has exposed you to ministries that you can almost go church shopping, as you said. I can look at where I am. I cannot say that I was in church. I grew up in a Baptist church. Around 19 years old, I knew it was time for me to go, because I had grown that space of what God was carrying me. I went to another ministry, and I've only been in 3 ministries in my whole life, just 3 churches. And so when I went to my second church, I thought this was the place I grew. When I realized God was showing me more than he was showing the pastor, then I realized that was a problem. I need to leave that church because I'm seeing things. And when I'm addressing these things, the pastor said, no, that's not us. I said, well, I can't stay here because I knew if I stayed there, I was going to die. When I left that church, I didn't join another church for 4 years. I sat at home. I read my word, but I was spiritually mature enough that I could do that. Everybody can't do that. I didn't die in that space of 4 years because I wasn't connected to a local body. I was able to feed my spirit man so that I can grow. What am I saying? We have to begin to expose ourselves to different theologies as it relates to the culture of the Black church. In other words, I've got to be able to go to a Muslim brother and sister and say, let me look at some of your theology and some of your beliefs. How does that look like in a Christian setting? I know some of you are saying, why is she talking about Muslim? We've never got to look outside of our spirit of religion because now we're all on the same playing field. So now Muslims are looking at Christians, Christians are looking at other religions. So if whatever drew them before COVID, you need to look and see if that's the same thing that's going to draw them back. So now how you reach people before, you're not going to reach them the same way before. You can't put door knockers on the door. Come on now, we can't put door knockers on the door. We can't go and give out tracts. No, we've got to reach them through a different sphere. We've got to look at how we do church from a different level, from a different lens. I'm going to tell you a quick story. One of the things that I thought was very monumental, to look at me, you would not know that I'm a 3-time stroke survivor. You wouldn't even know I had 3 strokes. And I tell people, the only way that you know that I'm a stroke survivor is that if you know me, you know how I operate. You know that I am kind of laid back. I don't really show myself really in a point where I'm thinking, hey, this is good for me. Kim, I'm sorry for saying, Kim, if you can hear me, can you bring my phone charger downstairs? I'm sorry, God, my phone's getting ready to die. One of the things that I looked at, I said, God, how is it that I don't look like what I've been through? I'm not a wounded warrior. I'm not wounded. I may look wounded at times, but there's times that I can really look at myself. I need to overcome this. I can say for me, the first 30 days of the COVID was exhaustion on my body. It was exhausting because I was preaching to a screen and I wasn't getting the physical amen back. So I said, what is it I need to do? So I joined a call on Monday nights with a counselor, with a licensed psychologist. So all her on Monday night was group therapy. We had group therapy with a group of pastors where she poured in us. We were able to be honest. We were able to be transparent. We were able to be ourselves on this call. It wasn't live. And when I tell you, it helped me so much in those 30 days to be on that call with a licensed therapist who we were able to talk about our ups and our downs, what we didn't like about it. We were free to express ourselves. And when I was able to come out at 30 days of group therapy on Monday nights, I looked at my life and said, what is it that I need to do different? So I began to evaluate how I see life from a different lens. I'm partially blind in the left eye. You would never know it if I didn't tell you. And so now I see things clearly than I've seen them before. Honestly, I told my doctor the other day when he called me Friday, we can't go into the doctor's office because of the pandemic. He said to me, Erica, I know there's a lot of things going on. He said, but I was worried about some of my stroke and heart patients of how this would affect me. He said, but I can say that I've had less concerns about my heart stroke patients than I have patients with diabetes. He said, because you all are following the rules. You put into place the things we asked you to do. We said, don't go in this space. Don't find yourself in this space. What am I saying? You have to learn to work in the space that God has given you. Stay in your lane. Can I say that again? You've got to learn to stay in your lane. If you do not stay in your